Welcome to this chess video, everyone. So here we have a game of mine which I played in August of 2022, and this was an in-person game. It was unrated at my local chess club, but here we have an opponent which was much stronger than me at the time. Here my opponent, I'm estimating their rating. I know for sure they were an expert. I'd estimate them about 2050 or so, and this is for USCF rating. Now my rating at the time, I was only about 1750-ish, I'd say. My chess.com at the time, I remember, was about middle 1900s. So here, they're definitely the better player. But we do get a really good game out of it. And this is just a game that I remember very well just because of how I played and how quickly they got the advantage from me. So here we start off with d4. And so they play d5 themselves. I play c4. And we have the regular Slav defense. I will play knight f3, normal developing move. They play knight f6. All of this completely normal opening theory so far. I play knight to c3, all very thematic moves. But now we have an interesting idea, which is d captures c4. And instead of this, we could look at some other thematic Slav defense ideas. So perhaps one thing they could do is maybe instead of this, they could consider developing this bishop. This is probably more thematic kind of Slav defense way to play it, if you so chose to get your bishop outside of the pawn chain before you close it with pawn to e6. Now the other way, of course, is you don't have to play the regular Slav. You can also choose to keep the bishop inside the pawn chain and play pawn to e6, and this will be known as the semi-Slav. And so these are some other options that they had, but in the game they chose to take on c4 fairly early. Hopefully for them, they'll try and secure this pawn with pawn to b5, and hopefully for white, they can get some initiative and development before black has a chance to secure this pawn. And so a common idea is e4. If you want to try and advance, say they go like here, you can immediately attack the knight, and that's one variation. Another variation you can play is instead to try and stop them from playing b5 and play a4, and this is what I actually went for in the game. So here we have a4. Now they bring the bishop out. I play knight to e5, and now here I was actually expecting, like, say, pawn to e6. If we were to get this, what I was actually fully intending at this point is to actually play pawn to f3. The idea, of course, you're preparing e4, and you get a really thematic bishop sacrifice on e4, where they get 3 pawns for the piece. But this game goes a little bit differently, and so for this game, they do not play e6, and they play instead this knight to a6. Yeah, because this is a really interesting idea that really kind of threw me off the time. Like, perhaps knight b to d7, perhaps e6, but knight a6 is kind of strange looking. Like, are they intending to go back to c7? Maybe in some lines, but what are they actually planning here? And so I try and develop normally and intend to, recapture this pawn with my bishop. But now, of course, the idea of their last move becomes very apparent, because now this knight is hopping into b4 very quickly. And just like that, this bishop and knight are already attacking me. And so now I play bishop captures c4. And now they must play e6. This is pretty much mandatory. Or at the very least defend this pawn again, maybe like dropping the bishop back. And the reason you have to do that is, let's just say they waste a move, let's say here. Well, then there's a very not so subtle threat where I can just play here, and this is a checkmate in 1. So they have to defend that. And so pawn to e6 just makes sense because you block the checkmate, but you also might develop this bishop somewhere along that diagonal. So now here comes, I think, really a fairly critical moment of the game, because this is still opening theory, but, I did not know that at the time. I'm already out of book. My opponent probably knew this. But my opponent probably knew theory, but, I was out of book. And so I think what's correct looking back is really I should have just castled here. And so castling is just a normal move, makes sense. Our king is safe, and now play continues. Like, maybe they can bring out their bishop, maybe they can get castled, and I think we're fairly equal here. Now, instead of that, I didn't really want to allow knight c2. In this case, it's nothing, because if they were to play the knight to c2, I can play e4 in interference, and then my queen might be able to take their knight. So they weren't threatening right away, but perhaps in the game I was a bit nervous and thought they were actually threatening that. And so I didn't want to castle, but I didn't like the fact that they were putting a lot of pressure on my position. And so I thought, well, how can I get rid of this pressure? And my solution in the game, I can't blame the reasoning, was let's bring my bishop back and let's trade things off, right? If they get rid of their bishop, then I can take back. Actually, I'll put on the board as a variation. That might be a little easier. So if I go here, I was hoping for them to take. And then I think I can take, they take back, we simplify, And I think I'm equal in this position. And at the very least, I've gotten rid of their bishop that was active outside their pawn chain. And so I think with this, I'm in fine shape, and then I can get castled. The problem was, the reason why this is a mistake from me is they do not have to take the bishop here. It's a mistake because they can take instead with their knight. And by doing so, they actually win the bishop here. They don't have to trade down all the way. So they got my bishop, I get their knight, but now they do not want to take, because now they have the 2 bishops, and I do not. And this is a very small detail that becomes, I think, really important, and in my opinion, the reason why I ended up playing this game the way I did, and got the result that I did. So here they continue development, trying to get castled. I have castle, they do the same. And now I play queen to e2. And my idea was, of course, I want to get everything off the back rank, keep my development going, and, go from there. Now, objectively, h3 is maybe better, controlling the g4 square. That's a very thematic idea. But in this case, queen e2 I thought was okay. And now they play pawn to h6, which c5 right away, attacking the center, was a very good-looking move. But with this, they're trying to make sense of the fact they have the bishop here. If I ever attack this bishop, now they have a retreat square, and they can just keep this bishop very safe and maintain the fact that they have 2 bishops and I do not. And with the bishop here, if one side has it and the other side does not, usually it is worth roughly half a pawn. So even though material is equal, my expert opponent here is roughly up half a pawn, I would say, at least practically speaking. So I continue developing, rook to d1, and they just bring their bishop back, unprovoked, and I thought this was kind of a waste of a time in the game. But now looking back, I actually can see the value of them just really being safe and just getting their bishop out of harm's way. So now I play pawn to b3, and my idea was just, my bishop wasn't really doing much. I didn't really love bringing it to d2. Maybe I can perhaps consider trading it off or something, because now I realize that maybe this dark squared bishop for me is not so great. I mean, if we were to look back, a lot of my pawns are on dark squares, and how am I getting this bishop outside the pawn chain? But now they play queen to a5, already going after my weaknesses, because when I push b3, I now have weakened dark squares. And they're actually already attacking my knight, which is not super fun. And so the next move here, I thought, well, what can I do? I can defend the knight, sure, but do I have to? Like, can I use this to my advantage? And my thought was, hey, I could actually relocate this knight. It's not so good here anyway. Maybe I can bring it back. And my intention was something like here to b1, and then maybe like d2, possibly a3, and then coming to c4. And I think from c4, I'm trying to deter their thematic e5 pawn break, and I'm also attacking the queen. So I thought that was a little bit better, and I thought my knight to b1 in the game was a really clever solution. Now, when I played it, it's okay. I don't mind it, but I don't think it's as clever as I thought when I played this. They play knight to d5, and now I'm already seeing a lot of pressure. For example, they're threatening this fork if my knight moves. And so I'm kind of in some trouble here. And I also really wanted to develop my bishop. Now, the move that I was debating between, the one I really wanted to play, was bishop a3, because I still wanted to trade the bishops. Here I do not have the bishop pair, and really my dark squared bishop is my bad bishop, so I would love to exchange that off for theirs if I get the chance. Now the problem in my mind, I thought, was if I put the bishop here on a3, this is what I had calculated in the game. Bishop captures, knight captures, and then I thought knight c3 was forking me and I lose material. Now, in retrospect, post-game analysis, I realized this is actually a threat that I shouldn't have been worried about. Because here there is one move white can play, and this is queen to e1. And now their knight is actually pinned. So it looks like a fork, but now because their queen is pinned, I'm actually winning material, and white is actually ahead now. And so why couldn't I have played over here? If I go queen d2, this actually does not work. Because now they can take my knight, now that my queen is in between the rook and the knight, and I'm actually losing in that position. Like if I were to recapture back, for example, I'm no longer on this diagonal, and now they can just take my rook, and black is definitely better. So going back here, I kind of gave up on the move that I wanted to play, and I thought I had to settle for bishop d2. It attacks the queen, it prevents them from coming knight c3, and I thought that this was decent at the time being. Now they just casually come back, queen to b6, and now I want to continue my knight. So they took away this square for my knight, I'm no longer going there, I'm not really trading off the bishop anymore, well too defended on that square. So let's bring the knight to a3, let's get it to c4, and I thought that this would be an improvement of my piece. Now I play the knight to a3, and already I'm in a little bit of trouble, because now they actually play queen captures b3, and I completely missed that pawn. All of a sudden your position's collapsing. And we'll come back to a few of these moments here and show kind of what I think really kind of led up to this moment. But there isn't too much left, because now I figure, well, I have to play something. Let's attack their queen with a rook. Maybe start attacking b7 behind it. But, of course, now, though, this blunders the knight. And it's like everything is starting to collapse. I trade. I didn't think there was much choice. I take here. I'm down by 3 points. Of course, I would love trading. I do not want to trade rooks. So I'll just go here. And now they have bishop captures a3. And this is where I resign, because I can't even take back. Because if I do, they'll play here. And this is just going to be a checkmate because of my weak back rank. So where did I really go wrong here? Because I thought I was playing pretty well. My opponent played really well this game. But what did I do wrong? And I think the moment where I actually went wrong here was this one move. I think this one mistake. And yes, it was natural to try and get rid of the pressure that was here. But the problem in doing so was when I brought back my bishop, I assumed that they would trade everything. And that assumption was wrong, because they will take with the knight only. And when I take back, I've lost the bishop pair. And I think that's that little detail, the reason that I lost. And in the regular post-game analysis, where over the board you can talk to the other person, they were really sure about the bishop pair being their asset. And they were more than happy to share with me why they thought the bishop pair was so much better for them in the game. But for me, it was a learning process, and I really remember that game and their analysis afterwards. And because of that, even though this game was a while ago, it still left a really good impression on me. And I remember how powerful the bishop pair was because of the loss that I experienced in this game. Look how natural their moves are from this point on. Like, my moves were fairly hard to find, but them, they just develop, very casual, right? I castled, they do the same, this is all normal stuff. But it's almost as if the game is playing itself, because one little detail, and now I play another inaccuracy. Like, it's very hard to find the really good moves constantly. You just retreat the bishop, very simple. I move my pawn here, trying to get rid of the problem of my bishop. But again, all this wouldn't happen if I still had my bishop pair, because then I wouldn't be worried about trying to get rid of the bishop, because trading here, the whole point is to get rid of their bishop, because mine is not so good, and they still have 2 bishops. So again, it goes back to the fact that I gave up my light-scored bishop here on d3. I really shouldn't have given up that bishop, but I voluntarily gave up the bishop pair, and that's what's costing me the game. And, as they go here, this is all natural. My maneuver was a good try, but still losing. And eventually we get to the point where everything just started collapsing. But really, I believe it was the fact that I lost the bishop pair that basically lost me this game. I thought this game was a really good illustration of why that is. So, it was a tough loss for me, but I hope it was instructional for everyone. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you in the next chess video.